Welcome to Reflections on Leadership in Combat, Parenting, and Higher Education, today's session of the Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series webinar. Today's webinar is offered in valued partnership with Tech United NJ, and we thank them for their support. Because today is Veterans Day, this is a very special edition of the Rutgers Business School Signature Leadership Series. We will hear about how lessons of resilience, resourcefulness, responsibility, and reinvention apply both similarly and differently in military versus civilian and life situations, civilian business and life situations. I would like to start by telling you a little bit about today's moderator. He's a dear friend to Rutgers, the business school, veterans, and to me personally as well. John Chaco is a pharmaceutical professional with 21 years of experience in the industry. He's currently leading the business continuity management and exercise readiness for Bristol Myers Squibb and is an active member of their veteran community network. He's a 27-year veteran of the Marine Corps Reserve, a retired lieutenant colonel. He served as an infantry officer, both on active duty and in the reserves in Southwest Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, including multiple combat tours. John has been known to joke and call himself half Army because he's both Army Ranger and Airborne qualified, having attended those schools during his time on active duty with the Marines. We're extremely proud to welcome John back to Rutgers. He currently serves on the Rutgers Business School Military and Veteran Advisory Board. John also happens to be a 1995 graduate of Rutgers. He was on scholarship as a decathlete on our track and field team, and he later obtained a master's in electrical engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. Welcome and thank you, John, and please take it from here.
Thank you, Margaret, for the very nice introduction. I am proud and honored to be here today to have a chance to introduce and talk to and interview our honored guest that's here today. For Rutgers the Business School Signature Leadership Series. I believe we have about 40 minutes of a chance to talk to our honored guest, and then we'll leave some time for some Q&A from everyone that's watching today. So we're very fortunate today to have with us Dr. Mark Anarumo, Colonel, U.S. Air Force retired, who's a highly decorated Army and Air Force veteran, scholar, and practitioner in the fields of terrorism, political violence, criminal justice, character development, and leadership. He became the 24th president of Norwich University in June of 2020 and assumed the presidency amidst the COVID-19 global pandemic and led the university through a successful year of full yet modified campus operations, including academics, athletics, and student life. His empathetic leadership demonstrated in such challenging times attracted national news media coverage, highlighting his proactive, transparent, and frugal communication that emphasized student mental health and the well-being of the university and the central Vermont communities. If that's not enough, Dr. Anarumo is a 3-time graduate of Rutgers University, including the Air Force ROTC Detachment 485 as a distinguished graduate, which is a national recognition amongst Air Force ROTC units. So, sir, you're a true inspiration role model for everyone participating in this forum today. So happy Veterans Day and welcome back to Rutgers.
Thanks very much. Appreciate everyone's hospitality. It's been really remarkable and very wonderful. My daughter Julia is a current student of Rutgers as well, and she is here in the studio with us. And I'm very grateful for your willingness to step up and moderate this event.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to talking to you. You have an amazing bio. Everything that we've talked about, everything I've learned about you, I can't wait for everyone to hear some of your stories. And we have a lot to get to. So just starting with your education background from here, I'm really looking forward to learning about you, about your leadership journey, your balance and your challenge between your service and family, and of course, your love of education. So it's funny that we actually both share the same undergraduate degree. Mm-hmm. We were a year apart at Rutgers University. We probably had some of the same professors or perhaps some of the same classes. But can you talk a little bit about your personal education journey? Why did you choose Rutgers and how did you get started with them?
So I left high school when I was 17 from Middletown, New Jersey, and I wound up joining the Army. And I enlisted because I needed to mature and I was not ready for college. And that changed the trajectory of my life. And I'm very grateful for those that led me through that process. And then when I was getting ready to separate from the Army for my first enlistment. I was going to re-enlist, but then I was looking at college options. I decided I wanted to pursue an officer career and potentially change services too. I really had a strong desire to come home. And I'm a Jersey boy. If you're from this fine state, there's always a draw to come back. And I knew at the time, because I had a lot of high school friends that I stayed in touch with when we used to write letters, that they were really enjoying their experience at Rutgers University. There was a young lady named Leanne Siprich, who I was in contact with, and then Marilyn Janakuros. Those two probably were the most instrumental in bringing me here. So they gave me their friends' contact information, wound up in a house on Gilden Street, and came as a 20-year-old first term enlisted soldier coming on the Montgomery GI Bill. And I could not have been more grateful for the course I put my life on.
Yeah, it's amazing. I guess the first, counter question to that is, why not the Marines? Why
not the Marines? Well, there's a longer story about my experience at the recruiting station in Red Bank, New Jersey that we'll save for the Q&A perhaps.
Okay, no problem. You also have a lot of follow-up degrees besides the undergraduate degree here. So maybe you just explain some of your history with that, and then how you're able to accomplish those while you were serving on active duty.
So a lot of people don't realize, and I have to take this opportunity to really recognize Rutgers University, what has happened in the veteran community and veteran support programs here since our time in the early 90s. It wasn't hostile to military then, but it just wasn't a lot of veteran support services available. But what this university has done for our veteran community is extraordinary. I'm very grateful to everyone at Rutgers who has done that. So a lot of folks don't realize how many educational opportunities and programs you can access through active duty. The Post 911 GI Bill is one of the great benefits in American public service history. But back then, the Montgomery GI Bill is strong, so it helped obviously fund my undergraduate degrees. But I got my master's and my PhD fully funded by the Air Force through fellowship programs. So I was an Air Force fellow, not once, but twice at Rutgers University in Newark, first at the School of Criminal Justice, and then at the graduate school for my PhD. And then they also funded me to go on a postdoctoral experience at Harvard. So from active duty, you have incredible access to funded educational programs, the tuition assistance program, where you can get your degree pretty much for free. So really wonderful programs in the military, and some take advantage of it fully, like I did. Some can't, and they don't have the opportunity because of their operational requirements. But there are programs that are persistent and fully accessible and just change the course of a life like mine.
That's amazing. I mean, now with the Post 911 GI Bill and how you're able to transfer that eligibility to dependents and family members, I think, it's amazing. I think it's going to shape the future of education.
Absolutely. The GI Bill after World War II changed the course of what American society would be. I think the Post 911 GI Bill will do the same, like you said.
Yeah, that's amazing. Your career in the Air Force, quite distinguished.
Thank you.
So you have a long history of the career, and I know there's not enough time to go through everything, but can you share some of the highlights of your career and some of the commands and maybe billets that you held throughout that time?
Sure. It's been, like you said, it was a heck of a journey, right? I was getting involved in a security and law enforcement career field called the security police in the Air Force. It was kind of an Army-centric job in the Air Force as an officer, so I was able to leverage my enlisted time, but I was very happy in that career field. Now we're called the Defenders, Security Forces. And I'm working on terrorism and getting interested in it academically. I was in Saudi Arabia when 9/11 happened. I was starting what I thought was going to be a quiet 1 year to write my dissertation. And of course, 9/11 happens 3 weeks into my tour. Julia is in the audience here in the studio. She was born in May of 01. I left in August of 01, and then I came back into quite a unique circumstance. Carrie Eichhorst, I know, was actually taking part of this, and she'll be thrilled right now to hear me call her name out. She was with me in Saudi Arabia when 9/11 happened. So that was a pretty extraordinary moment. And then really the bookends was a 1 year captain, brand new captain when that occurred. And one of my last assignments was I was the vice wing commander of a base in Turkey called Incirlik. And this was when ISIS was getting very active. There was government upheaval in Turkey, and my children were at risk, and they had to be evacuated from Turkey to go to Germany and finish up the school year. My older son was a senior. Julia was just starting high school. It was very disruptive to my family, as a single parent. And this is one of those lessons where when you think a door closes, that was your future, that was your dream, that drove me to transition to more of a higher ed track to conclude my career, go to the Air Force Academy, which led me to be the president at Norwich. Had those terrible things not happened, I would be in a different trajectory and not be where exactly, I'm right now exactly where I'm supposed to be when I was supposed to be there. But if I lamented on the loss of opportunity that I thought I wanted, it would have been much different. So those are probably, to your question, the 9/11 event and what that did to my career field in the world, obviously afterwards. Iraq, Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan was one of my most enjoyable tours. A lot of people can't find Kyrgyzstan on the map. But it was an incredible nation. I loved it there. And we had multiple tours in Korea. And my children, if they could tomorrow, if I said we're moving to Turkey or Korea, they'd start packing. And we had wonderful experiences there as family.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I do want to get back to that story and talk about your family. I want to talk a little bit more about your military career. And I always laugh and I was chuckling because I love the Marine Corps and Navy bases, always on the beach and the water.
Yeah.
And that's who I am. I always take a look at where the Air Force Army bases are. And I love being in the Marines for a lot of the locations that they've been in. But going through your career, I mean, Kyrgyzstan and Saudi Arabia and where you've been, I'd love to talk a little bit about some lessons in leadership, especially during in the post 9/11 environment. As we know, the military changed greatly after that. All the services were affected. A majority of the people in the military now, of course, started serving post 9/11, and they know nothing different than what happened and occurred and the change in the military structure afterwards, and the way it continues to change. Can you share some potential leadership challenges that you had, how you accomplished them, and maybe what you learned from them?
So like you, we inherited and we entered a service that was built for the Cold War, right? So it was a kind of stoic, very structured, very, I guess cylinder is the best way to answer, right? But then we learned on the battlefield through some missteps, and then recovered through great ingenuity, which I think if the American military is one quality that makes us the most effective fighting force in the world, it's our agility and the innovation and the ability to really harness the American entrepreneurial spirit. So we had to reform the entire military. We changed how we fought, how we communicated, how we were structured. Breaking out of those very cylindered vertical organizations to much flatter organizations. And then of course the team of teams model that was birthed and then showed us to be quite more effective in places like Iraq and Afghanistan especially, but that was built on what made our adversaries so effective. So we adapted much of their structural competencies and made ourselves better. So we're going through that evolution. And then also, to me, one of the great leadership challenges is these young men and women that are making up our first term. So the bottom of the pyramid of the physical force structure, our talent, they are much different than we, right? And we were much different than those that were above us. So we learned a certain way, we were effective in a certain way in applying combat power or just leading or being effective. These young men and women are totally different. And we have to meet them where they are. We have to understand how they learn, how to leverage their talents. They're incredibly talented, but they're not as effective when we impose our models on them. So we have to adapt our style to be more effective leaders. So those are things I got to see over time through very complex mission sets. If we listen and leverage the talent of the younger generation now, we are much more effective. They'll do enough if we tell them what to do. We tell them what has to be done and let them figure it out. There's a great foursquare about being low energy but high intelligence, or low intelligence, high energy, and how this all fits into a model. Letting these young men and women who can be highly innovative and flexible in application of talent, that's the key to the future.
I agree. I mean, those are amazing lessons learned right there. I think, the flexibility and the speed to which our U.S. military has evolved since 9/11 just amazes me.
Yeah.
I remember, when serving and just there's new gear and equipment every week, it seems like you get handed it and you have to learn as you go, especially during the heat of the battle. Throughout your time and all the leadership that you had experienced, are there any leaders that you looked up to, any mentors that you learned from, anyone you can point to us and tell us what was so important about that?
Yeah, there are many, obviously, and I got to meet a lot recently. We always learn. We keep learning. I just had General Funk at Norwich University. He gave us a wonderful award. We're the #1 school for ROTC in the country. It's called the MacArthur Award. It was, and very happy to receive it. And he was an incredible gentleman, incredibly thoughtful. And he has Funk's rules, and he has these things that you have to that you need to learn throughout life. Very clever, very innovative, and he's such a gregarious personality, and he's wonderful. He's now one of my new mentors. I want to see how he's leading. He's a 4-star in charge of all military training for the Army. But coming out of the gates, one of my first commanders in the Army was named Christopher Mitchell, and he came from Eastern Kentucky University. And I was at Fort Hood, Texas, in the 2nd Armored Division, 3rd Battalion, 67th Armor specifically. But his leadership style and the way that he connected with all of us as our company commander, just you never wanted to let him down. You didn't work hard because you were told to work hard and that was your job as a soldier. I worked hard because I never wanted to let that leader down. And that was a lesson I learned early. If you have that informal connection, people will work for you and they don't want to disappoint you. And that's much more effective than not wanting to get in trouble, right? Here at Rutgers University, my detachment commander was a gentleman named John Desmond. They called him Blackjack Desmond, who was an unbelievable gentleman and really shaped my personality as an officer going into the Air Force and transitioning. And he spent a lot of time with me. He was a phenomenal leader. He lives in Delaware. I connected with him so powerfully, and I was so grateful for him. I actually flew him to promote me to all of my ranks, up to and including colonel, which I earned in the Pentagon. And I got promoted in the Pentagon before I went to Turkey as a new 06. So I would say those two probably were the two that I tried to emulate for many different reasons.
Well, I think it's an amazing story, and I'm sure who you're leading now and what you're doing at Norwich University, you have a lot of students that are looking up to that same type of leadership between their professors and the staff and yourself. So that's amazing from there. Going back to education a little bit. So throughout your career, you had a lot of different billets, as we mentioned before. You also had a lot of degrees that I'm sure you were able to relate to your military experience. So were you able to sort of leverage your education into some of your billets throughout your career, and how did that correlate between one another?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to encourage everyone, and I did, I know one of the 4 R's that I got to learn, and I love it. I'm going to try to borrow those to Norwich and make them obviously the 4 N's. I'll have to reinvent them, but how you reinvent yourself. Because I did, my academic specialty it was terrorism and political violence. And then I was doing that in the field. And I was teaching it online for several universities, including Rutgers, to stay current in the field and trying to write and publish in those areas too. But I did realize it made me more effective because I had an academic pairing with my professional execution. But I was actually getting to be in a pretty dark place. If your only thing ever talking about, living and writing about is terrorism and the darkest side of human nature, it was affecting me. It was affecting me significantly. So I had to reinvent myself. So I had the degrees, I had the academic rigor that Rutgers gave me to get back into other academic fields. And I started looking at character development, leadership development, organizational culture, how to reinvent organizations to be more effective, more agile, more transparent, more effective, more relevant. So I did a complete reinvention of who I was academically and professionally. And it led to the job I had before Norwich, which was being the director of a Center for Character and Leadership Development at the Air Force Academy. And it really reinvigorated my entire person, right? And I loved it. It was engaging. I got to work with young people again, not in a way to be more effective in the field, to be more combat effective, which was rewarding, but takes its toll. Now to be a greater leader of character, how to be more effective, how to care for others, how to have an empathetic leadership style while you're an effective warrior. And you can bridge those 2 things. So that I hope that answers the question, but you can leverage your academic specialty, but don't be afraid about taking a risk and reinventing yourself later.
Right. And I think a lot of people ask me too, what should they study in? What is their career profile going to look like? And my experience with them is always, it doesn't necessarily matter for you to work in the exact career field that you studied in, because there's a lot of lessons learned to get through your career and moved in. And same thing in the military, transitioning billets every few years, you'll learn something new and experience that, and then maybe go back for further schooling in that. Yes. So I think there's a lot to learn from that. You mentioned before about the challenges with your family being evacuated from Turkey, and that caused you to transition sort of in the education environment. So can you talk a little bit about your journey from that billet in Turkey to where you ended up now at Norwich University as the president?
Yeah, so it was once again the example of I wanted to go be a wing commander in the States. I was going to be competitive for general officer rank. But, I look at my children, my daughters over here, and I put them through a lot. And it was very challenging as a parent, right? Because your first responsibility as a parent, but as a military leader, as a leader in any organization, you also have responsibility for your entire population of employees or military members and all those kind of things. So having those things be so out of balance for me was very disruptive. And then I looked at this opportunity at the Air Force Academy. And even though I didn't get because the military is all about it's meritocracy, and we make people feel as if sometimes if you don't make the next rank, if you don't achieve the next level of command, that somehow you're a failure or that you've fallen short of expectations. But the fact is, only 1% are going to reach the tip of that pyramid, right? So a lot of people are going to top out at different ranks, and that's good. That's a great service. You had a great service, and thank you, everyone. If you top out a staff sergeant or a major, you served, and that's wonderful. But we do put it in people's minds that if you don't become the number one everything, and if you don't make general officer rank, somehow you've been a failure. And I saw that affect people very adversely as they hit the end of their career. So when I didn't get what I wanted, I was disappointed. And, you know, it wasn't like, it was kind of like a consolation prize, I almost felt like, in a way, but I wanted to do the right thing for my family. But then once I got there and I got immersed, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is wonderful. The door that was closed that I was still surly about closing wound up being the best thing that could have possibly happened to me and my family. I got into organizational culture, leadership development, like I said, went on the speaking circuit. I was speaking somewhere, Duke University Law School, talking about really empathetic leadership styles and how to gain trust and how to maintain that sacred trust with your employee base. And someone's in the audience and said, our university president just stepped down, you would be perfect. I said, university president, I can't be university president. So I kind of blew it off. And then I went to Guam to help solve a problem between the Air Force and the Navy. And a typhoon hit. And I had nothing to do because it was, you know, I was just kind of sitting in this room, and I got to go work in a place that had generator power, and I just had the time. I knocked out the application, sent it in, and I became a finalist for 4 university presidencies in the first 8 months, I would say 6 to 8 months. And I was like, geez, maybe I could be university president. Then I started really diving into the literature about what is going on in higher education, demographic challenges, how higher ed is shifting now. And I became very passionate about, I think I would love to be a university president and bring this vision and energy to an institution. And I'm so grateful that of the ones that were considering me, when I would have been honored to take any of those positions, that Norwich was one of them, because it is, I'm so happy. And it's such a wonderful university. And I'm so grateful that they gave me the opportunity to lead there. And we're doing some amazing things at Norwich. And I'm very, very, very proud to be part of the university.
You've done amazing things at Norwich, and Norwich is a great university, but you also took over during a very challenging time. So yeah, let's talk a moment about COVID.
No, I thought we were going to get through this without talking about COVID. No, it's
and we're 6 feet apart. I think we're safe on that. But talking about that when you took over, so we're during the height of COVID, June 2020, and moving in from there, I think you had to make some very tough leadership decisions right off the bat. So can you share some of the stories about what you decided to do at the university?
Sure. So I was announced as a new president on January 28th. And then about a week later, people started talking about this thing that was happening in China. And then, of course, I'm watching this at the Air Force Academy, and I'm watching it happen. And the decisions that were made, best decisions that could have been made at the time with everything we knew and understood. And I got to be part of the leadership team that was influencing somewhat, but I was watching our superintendent. His name is Jay Silveria. He has since retired, but he was superintendent of the Air Force Academy, and just how thoughtful he was and how he communicated in the clear. And I still respect him very deeply as a leader. And he was a superintendent there. And then there were the mental health challenges tied to the students. You know, who stays on campus? Who can go remote? Can you meet your training objectives that are mandated by law at a service academy, but reduce public health risk to those larger populations? So this wicked problem set, and I'm watching. And of course, I have my moments thinking, oh my God, do I really want to be a university president? Because no matter what decision he made, 30% of the population that was listening thought it was the worst decision in the world, and they hated him for it. Not disagreed, they hated him for it. And then I knew that was going to be the environment I would, no matter where I went, because everyone's ramped up right now in emotion. We've lost the ability to disagree respectfully. We need to bring back the concept of grace and treat each other with higher levels of grace. And I've been trying to communicate that to our community in Norwich. But yeah, so showing up online or remote. And people forget, you know, higher ed is very strange because people are simultaneously providers and customers constantly. The faculty are the provider of the classroom experience, but they're also the customers in the context of their employees of the university. We had to, and that got lost in higher ed. It was all about the students all the time, which is where it should be. But we forgot about our faculty and our coaches and our professional staff. They also are under tremendous physical stress, emotional stress. And we really have been very thoughtful at Norwich to put them at the front. I'm very proud to say we went through the pandemic with no layoffs. We actually increased benefit funding to fully fund healthcare increases. We really prioritized our employee base to make sure they knew they were going to be taken care of. When other schools took necessary cuts, every school made their own choices. I'm not judging anyone, but building the culture where there's that trust, and they know they'll be cared for, that it is an environment that they can innovate in, that they will be treated with respect and resourced appropriately. And when they need, right now, today, the last 2 days at Norwich have been respite days for everyone. And we have heavy programming, but then, then who cares for the caretaker? Then we got to make sure those are cared. So it's all those problem sets that are very interrelated, but we have to pay attention to all of them. And you have to be ready to take the beating, because beyond the individual employees or the students that think one decision is terrible and then I'm a terrible person for making that decision, we have the outside constituent groups, the alumni that want to, be involved, certainly, and they want to understand. And then we have the parents, who they're very engaged right now, this generation of parents. And that's where we learn the critical value of over communication. In crisis, there is an information tapeworm in all communities. So we tried memos that no one read, right? Then we tried to do town halls that were overtaken by people that were passionate about one area, but we didn't get to the full content. And we found in that environment, the sweet spot was 5 to 7 minute video vignettes. Here's the decision. Here's why we made the decision. Let's look after each other. Everyone, let's ramp down the emotion and take care of one another. And those seem to really hit the mark. So they've been out there, and we've created a greater effect through changing our communication style and increasing the frequency to meet others where they are instead of where we think they should be. Probably the best example was food, because we couldn't, because of state of Vermont requirements during the emergency, couldn't operate our dining facility the way we wanted to, the level of service. So parents are very engaged on the quality and the amount of food. And that's why I did what I did. I moved into the dormitory and I started eating the quarantine food packets that we were giving out, and they were fine. And I sat in that dorm room and I realized the parents weren't upset about the food per se. They were worried about were their children being cared for by the university. And when you understand that context, you can communicate much more clearly. So you have to peel back what they're really upset about.
Right. I need to go back to this because you kind of quickly covered it, but it's a very important topic. So you're a celebrity. You made national news for what you did pretty much immediately after you became the president. And that just shows everything you just talked about was true leadership. And where you're working now as a president at Norwich University, you need to apply that military leadership lessons learned to bring there to the student community and the staff, I'm sure, and the parents and the alumni and everyone else involved. But you just mentioned about moving into the dorm. So can you share the story about what you did and why that mattered and what you learned from that?
Yeah, it was funny because it kind of went off the rails quickly, and I didn't want it to. I didn't want it to be performative. I didn't want it to come across as insincere. And I asked everyone, I told 4 people, I said, don't tell anyone. I'm going to do it. I don't want a door card. I don't want anyone to know before I get in there. I don't want anyone to know until after I come out, because I wanted to see how are they living? How is the food? I just want to make sure it was a sincere event, which it was, but if it gets performative, then people doubt the sincerity of it. So I didn't want anybody to know. So I told 4 people. I went home, I packed a few boxes, and I got my cool college kid laundry basket that I put my stuff in. And I show up in the dorm and it has a door card with my name on it. Everybody knows. And I kind of lost the bubble on it quickly. OPSEC, operational security, we had none. So but I did get in, but not all the students knew. And then I did come in, and once I realized everyone knew, before I put myself in quarantine, I went to Domino's and I got, I don't know, like 80 pizzas, and I delivered them to everybody. I put them in the day room and put them in the other dorms.
With the hearts and minds.
Hearts and minds, and you always get, then the stomach's a valuable vehicle. Italian family background, so this is something I'm intimately familiar with. So then I got in there though, and I will tell you that that kind of changed the atmosphere on the campus, because the students felt like it was us and they don't understand what we're going through because we're being quarantined. And the quarantine was being driven by the state. It was a requirement, and through the status of the state in an emergency operation, they could dictate what a private college could, but everyone thought it was just, we were being dismissive and we were going home and we were having big parties every night and they were suffering. And then when they saw it, they were like, oh, he understands, and now he's going to understand more. And we actually, I brushed my teeth and take a shower right there. And I told him, I can't live with anybody that would be unfair to the student. And, so I had to be in a single and don't displace anyone. So I got the only single on campus, and I figured out right away why I was the only single on campus. It's a single block wall that shared the wall with the bathroom, the men's bathroom on that floor. And it was very, they left nothing to the imagination what was happening on the other side of the wall, put it that way. So I had to move the furniture around for a while, and kids will not take showers now without giant boom boxes, Bluetooth speakers. So I got to learn all about the new music, and I didn't like most of it. But then when they realized I was in there, it was the funny thing that it was funny in the media coverage as well. And I don't know how old they thought I was or think I am, but I'm only 51 years old. And they started playing like doo-wop music and big band. I'm like, you know, I'm not a World War II veteran guy. So I said, play your music. I actually want to learn about it. And most of it I didn't like. But my kids tried to get me into Post Malone. And I was very dismissive, and that's a lesson learned for me. And wound up, I really like Post Malone, and that became the big thing. So there's all these memes now they make of me face morphed with all the facial tattoos of Post Malone in my official military photograph. So they've had fun with it, but it's the whole concept of meeting the kids where they are. And in the military, right? You don't live with the officers in your air-conditioned tent. You go live in the worst tent in the worst part of the desert and with your troops that are having the worst time.
Lead by example. Perfect, right? I think
Always,
every
yeah.
military leader learns that, and everyone applies that. And it's important throughout life, whether it's through their family, in the military, even at school. You need to lead by example. And I think that'll help inspire others. But you have a perfect Halloween costume now, I think. So Post Malone and a couple of Halloween.
That's a good idea. I didn't think of, this year I was a giant inflatable panda. Last year I was Captain America. So I'll work, and we'll see if we
Very
can
good.
if I can post one on the campus, I will definitely dress up.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
I also know you had some great experiences in talking to the students while you were
Mhm.
living there. You mentioned a little bit about mental health struggles. I know throughout COVID, there's been a lot of discussion about amongst universities and at homes and at businesses and so forth. So can you talk about some of the lessons learned from there and any leadership decisions you helped with the university?
Sure. Yeah, and that's where that stay. And I did it twice. I did it once after we broke quarantine. I stayed we have military students in the Corps of Cadets, and we have civilian students in traditional dormitory environments. So the Norwich University is now a comprehensive university with both. We call them lifestyles. So I stayed in both, but the connection I had where I was on my mind, well, why don't we just go online? Let's reduce the pressure, get everyone home. It'll be easier, because it would be easier. But instinctively, we knew that the students needed the in-person environment, especially in the training environment like that, where we had to bring them all along. But this generation is all about experiential learning. They have to do things, and they can do things on campus. And another wrinkle, we can provide mental health counseling services to our students in residence, but when they're remote, we cannot provide Vermont licensed mental health practitioners to a student studying from home in New Jersey. That's not appropriate or legal. So we knew we could provide better service. We can give them the experience that they needed. But then living in their space and having them literally hide outside my door, and I could see their eyes peering up from the stairwell. Hey, are you just making sure that it's me, or do you want to talk? Well, sir, if you have a second. And we talk, lots of tears. I need to be here. I can't go home, various personal situations, or this is where they, and a young lady, gosh, I mean, she had me bawling. And I said, well, are you going to go home for break? What's your plan? She said, no, I feel much more, I've never been comfortable in my home environment. A New York City girl. But so I finally feel home, and I'm doing better in every regard of my life being here on campus. And there was a lot of stories like that. And I thought, well, they deserve every ounce of energy that I have and every tool in my toolkit to keep the school open and to have in-person instruction continue. And our faculty want that too. But I have to respect the faculty's desires and to listen to them to make sure they feel safe. So we've done more than most schools to make sure that we meet all the constituent group demands. But to feel the physical connection of we have to be here and listening and meeting that need, I think is what got our school in the news cycle in a very positive way.
That's so impressive. And right now, corporations are struggling to get people back to work. Some people want to go back, some people don't. I've learned recently about cave syndrome. People have been so used to isolation that it's tough for them to break out of that mold now. I mean, that's just amazing leadership, and to get people to come back and be able to have that self-drive as well as to want to succeed while they're there. Talking about COVID, I don't know when we're going to move, to the new normal, but you talk about ever evolving. We talk about the military and how much we've changed since 9/11. But as we talk now about transitioning back to full-time education and going back into the routine sports and the educational status, what do you foresee as some of the challenges in the future as we move back to the new normal?
Well, I think we have to take advantage of some of the areas of excellence that were brought forward through the pandemic response. We have some professors that are better teaching online. Now, we can't put everything online, but what if there is a course that professor delivers with greater effect in an online environment because the content is just better delivered in that way? We have employees that would like to work from home, that are more productive working from home than they are in the physical seat on campus. And I think that's okay. There's been an immediate knee-jerk reaction. Let's get back to the way things were. Well, maybe there were things that were done better because there was a forcing function, an externally driven crisis. What can we leverage now and capture and say, let's perpetuate those things? So I think not taking the route of saying, let's go back to pre-pandemic once we're through and we can get back to normal. There might be some areas that you found that might be more effective because the crisis drove something creative. And we're going to leverage that at Norwich. And I think a lot of companies will too.
Right.
I think commercial real estate has been a terribly hit sector of the economy. People realize technology has caught up with the skill sets. You can do more remotely now than we ever could before. So it might be a better way to go in some areas.
I think so. And I think some of the students may regret that in the future.
Yeah.
No more snow days, but I think
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Vermont, I'm sure you're used to that. Up
Yeah,
there.
well, my daughter, she just had an exam. She had her professor took ill and couldn't deliver the exam, so it was proctored online, and she didn't miss a beat. Whereas when we were here, and there were a lot of snow days, I remember that. I mean, it threw the whole academic calendar out of whack. But now you can keep moving forward, meet your milestone, meet your gates without the hiccup that would have been there before.
Right. And there's so many degree options too. I mean, students that are coming to school now, future students, I know that it's overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? So what do you see as sort of a future big area of areas of study? And is there anything else that you're sort of working towards to predict?
Yeah, so we're starting to build out, and I had a quote that I shared in my inaugural speech that we have to prepare the students now for careers that do not yet even exist. And we have to respect and understand how quickly technology is moving, how quickly, so change. It doubles in rate and complexity every 18 months. So every 18 months, the rate and complexity of change doubles. And that's stolen from Moore's law in computing science about computing power. But we have to then build individual students and employees that are resilient. Resiliency is key. And they're adaptable, they're agile. So they can move forward into new subject areas. For example, so we have a very strong business school at Norwich University, and we're going to find ways to partner with my alma mater here at Rutgers. And Dean Lay and I have already talked, and we're very excited about the potentials there. So what is a demand signal from the employer community? So we need to put our graduates that are employable because they're moving into space that are emerging. Artificial intelligence is going to influence everything. Machine learning, data analytics, and really the holy grail of everything right now is quantum. The first nation that can leverage quantum computing is going to be it's going to be as dominant as we were after World War II with the only nuclear weapon. So quantum computing to me is everything, and everything will fall into it. And once quantum computing is fully reaches its full potential, what that will influence in machine learning and artificial intelligence, this is the next revolution. So we have got to be relevant in those emerging areas. And the only other one I'd offer is space. Space is becoming more and more critical as a domain, but not just for military, but for commerce, obviously for information. So those areas are areas that Norwich will be moving into very aggressively because they are the emerging areas of importance.
I'm sure there's a lot of interest too. So it's everything dominating the news and the media and emerging areas, like you call it. I think that it's going to be very, very popular if it's not already.
Yeah. Yeah. We have to meet employer demands because if you put out a graduate who can't be employable, then what have you done?
Right.
That's a value proposition that we must honor because people pay to come get a higher education degree. What's happening with student debt is, I think, unethical, and we have to address the affordability as well. But we have to put out graduates that are fully employable and can be successful.
Right. And I think, going throughout the last several years, everyone has learned to do more with less. Everyone's learning to multitask if you didn't already know how to do that all the time, but it's very easy to lose focus. And I know a lot of people too, I work with them and friends and family and everything else. It's so difficult to juggle so many things and to make sure you have to regain focus when you need to. I think it's a military trait that a lot of leaders learn from there. So maybe can you talk a little bit about how you can teach someone to regain focus?
Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think, the carrot stick metaphor just came into my head, but we do underappreciate our employees by nature, especially when you're crisis, you're going a million miles an hour. And Norwich University is a great example. I've asked a lot of our employee base. And in the meantime, there's financial hits against higher ed, and it's a hard time to value your employees monetarily if that's what they need to feel and what they need to see. But in the middle of all this, of fully funding healthcare increases from the university to keep their take-home pay the same, we're fixing our budget. And I'm asking our faculty and staff at our university to join me in increasing student success. So that really, if you come to Norwich, you're going to graduate, we're going to bring you through. But in the middle of that, I gave raises and faculty promotion and committee raises, but also an across the board raise that they hadn't seen in a while. But it was in the middle of fiscal belt tightening. So to keep people focused, they have to feel valued. They have to believe and know sincerely that we are investing in them. And we have to share gratitude and grace, which we have lost as a society. It's terrible. I'd like to repair that from Norwich University. But the occasional, hey, you're doing a great job. Hey, take a walk with me, have coffee with me today. I just want to tell you how awesome you are, how grateful I am that you're here. That is a focusing event. Because I mean, when do you really talk to? If you're not talking to your employees when things are going great, you only talk to them when things are bad. They hate to see you.
Right.
So it's that, bring it together. Let's have an offsite. You're getting next Monday off, fully paid, not going to affect your vacation days, because I would need you to focus on your family, right?
I am. Thank you. I get next week off then.
Yes, please, by all means. But we have employees at Norwich that will work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. And I'm to the point I'm taking away computers, laptops, so they won't work from home. We had our provost last year. She worked literally 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I said, give me your computer. You've got to go home and stop, right? Because you will burn out and this isn't good for you. It's not good for the institution. So stop. So I would say the positive reinforcement, recognizing the leverage points, what people need. It might be a paid day off. It might be a raise. It might be just a public acknowledgement. It might be a new office, who knows, but we got to listen to them and see how we can keep the focus by honoring what they need.
That's some great insight. Another thing I want to talk about is just mission statements. In the company I work for, I resonate very closely with it. I think it's related to both my personal values, my military values, what I've learned throughout my time in the military, and what I want to do in the future. So being able to support and prevail for our patients is what my company focuses on. And I do the same thing supporting, from the military. So mission in the Marine Corps was to fight and win wars, and I fight to win and help prevail and save our patients working from there. But can you talk a little bit about your personal mission statement and what that means to you?
Thank you. And I appreciate what you just said too, for your own. That's very honorable. So when I took over the Air Force Academy Center for Character and Leadership Development, I inherited a beautiful, elegant model called the Leader of Character Framework. And that really has become my personal mission statement. There's 3 elements to it. It's living honorably, elevating your personal performance, and lifting others. So those 3, that's kind of the 3 parts of my personal mission statement that I try to live every day. Live honorably, lift others, and elevate personal performance. Those are
and I think you're in a perfect role for that. So at the university from there. Yeah. I think we've talked about a lot here, and I want to save some time for Q&A that we have on here, but we're truly honored to have you. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us that we didn't have a chance to talk about?
Well, I didn't get a chance to say 2 very important things. First is this is being filmed live on Veterans Day. So I say to all who have served, happy Veterans Day, and also to the family members. My daughter's in here, and poor kid went to 6 high schools, 3 in 1 year, following dad around the world. But thank you to the families of the veterans too. It's an unsung hero job. It's stressful. The support that we feel as veterans from our families makes all the difference in the world. So thank you to the veterans. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you to the families of veterans. And to you, my friend, I will say happy birthday, Marine Corps. Yesterday,
thank you.
Semper Fi. We have a strong connection with the Marines at Norwich University, and I know that you're a Marine veteran. So yesterday was the Marine Corps anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Happy birthday.
Yes, and happy birthday, all the Marines, and happy Veterans Day.
You got it.
Yeah. Margaret, I'm not sure if we have any questions in the queue.
Thank you, John. We actually do have a couple of questions. So Mark, you have at least a couple students here in the audience, and I'll give those questions first. How has your military background helped you with leading at Norwich?
So Norwich University is one of the 6 senior military colleges, they're called. Norwich was the first, it's the oldest and the best. And then Citadel, VMI, Virginia Tech, Texas A&M, and University of North Georgia. Those are the 6. So as a senior military college, we have a thriving Corps of Cadets where we have a civilian population too. My military background has allowed me to bring relevance to our Corps of Cadet experience. They know I'm a recently retired colonel in the Air Force that was enlisted in the Army, and that's connective tissue that's very important to them. They can hear about the relevant state of the military. So we have a lot of veterans, obviously, that work at Norwich University. We have a lot of civilians that never served on active duty, but they're wonderfully additive and critically important to our university community. So it brings credibility to our core students, but because military cannot survive without our civilian partners that are government employees that support the military or work alongside us, I can bring that understanding to the civilian student population as well. So it's that, but it's also, of course, military is the ultimate leadership laboratory. It's the, oh my God, I guess we could say it's endless crisis, even in peacetime, right? Having to do more with less, understanding a resource, understanding how, and really what the military has learned and professionalized for mental health services to deal with veteran suicide or suicides in active duty. Those are things that I was able to bring to Norwich University, I think, with some pretty aggressive timelines.
That's great. Another question from one of your students. What was it about Norwich that attracted you to take that job versus several of the other presidencies that you talked about applying for?
I'll tell you, so Norwich, it's just a very special school, you know, and if anybody's watching from the other schools, you know, great schools too. I just feel this connection to Norwich that it's just very powerful. It's history. And the founder of Norwich University is named Alden Partridge, and he founded the school in 1819. He was a superintendent at West Point. And he is the person who founded the concept of the citizen soldier and creating useful graduates and making sure the Norwich University curriculum was relevant to what our nation needed at the time and now for me, it's what our nation needs now and moving forward. But he left West Point partly because he saw the military academy being populated by the children of the affluent, whether politically or an economy or an industry. And he wanted the US military to be populated in the officer corps by the children of farmers and immigrants and factory workers. So ROTC that we know now was actually the birthplace of ROTC is Norwich University, because he brought that model to say, let us have an officer, a professional military that is populated by a representative sample of our country, not just the kids of the elites. And it's that mission statement, that purpose, its founding principles is so powerful and so beautiful. And here I am, you know, a knucklehead kid from New Jersey who had to enlist, partly because a judge and police officer in Red Bank, New Jersey encouraged me to do so. And when I say encouraged, I mean aggressively encouraged. You know, and now I'm a president of a university. I was saved by two communities, the military and higher education. And for me, Norwich University represents the best of both.
I'd like to just follow up on that if I can. So there's probably a lot of questions. If they look at your bio, they see you. They know you were prior enlisted Army, then you were in the Air Force, retired as a colonel, and now you wear 2 stars as a major general in the Army for the university as a president. Can you explain how that works, just so people understand?
Sure. And those that knew me when I was enlisted, if anybody's watching, the 2-star rank, I'm sure, was quite amusing to them, as was the colonel rank. So every senior military college they are the state militia. They hold that designation from their host state. So the Vermont State Militia is Norwich University, and our faculty wear the uniform of the Vermont State Militia, and their rank is corresponding to their faculty posting and position. So the president of Norwich University is the highest ranking member of the Vermont State Militia, and that comes with major general rank. In the past, it was a 3-star rank for a while because they had a retired 2-star who came to work at the school. And they didn't, so it went through the legislature and it was fine. So I wear the major general rank as the president of Norwich University through the Vermont State Militia rank, but I'm a retired Air Force colonel. But I wear all my cool Army badges too. By the way, Ranger.
That's right, all the
Ranger
way.
lead the way. That's right. So I'm an Army Pathfinder too. So that's a unique badge to be wearing around campus too. So it's yeah, it connects, but that's the background of the rank.
Great, thank you.
Surely.
That's great. We did have some questions around campus about welcoming a general officer to campus and so forth. So thank you for the clarity on that. We have a question, and I'm going to try to summarize it a little bit because it was lengthy, but Mark, you had a lot of interaction with the media, and this person is asking about universities shaping students' perspective of media, given the changes that have taken place in the media, going from newspapers that were considered authority to now having social media and other forms of news being their sources. So this person is asking, What shall a university do to shape students' perspective on professional media?
No, that's a great question. It's an excellent question. Again, it's something I've been wrestling with. And these anonymized social media apps are really, they severely degrade the culture of any community that has them present. And I saw it happen at the Air Force Academy. I saw it happen at another college where I worked, and I've seen it start to take root at Norwich, and it's very concerning to me. So the media has become politicized, and there's these great drills you can do. If you find someone who thinks differently than you and do a Google search together on the same topic, you will get different answers based upon your past search histories. So all we've done is take someone, so if you're center left or center right, you get fed information that drags you further through the extremes of each. And there used to be this beautiful middle ground in our country where you could speak about everything, but you really were patriotic and you believed in our country, and then you talk through how to make it better. And you could disagree, but you had that common goal or that common connection. But we're being pushed to the margins by the way we are fed media, whether in the mainstream or on the other outlets, and certainly as anonymized apps, like I said. I mean, you cannot get your news from Instagram. You can't. That's not news. And you're being fed things that are developed by algorithm to feed your preconceived positions and notions on things. And that is a very difficult space to educate. So the best way to do it is to get the devices away and bring people that disagree into the same physical space together and find your common ground and recover the way that you can respectfully disagree. I disagree with a lot of folks that work at Norwich, and we talk about it respectfully. And in the end, we shake hands and we move on together with the direction we're going to take. But at least I want to hear, and there's a great quote, I believe it was from Mills: "He who understands only his side of an argument does not understand the topic." You have to understand and appreciate the opposing point of view. It refines your own, it might change your mind, and it'll just make you a better leader, certainly. But yeah, the current environment is so highly toxic on everything. And we are driven that way by the way we are consuming media. So we have to be responsible enough to dig through and push through to listen and watch and get opposing viewpoints. And I'm hoping an outlet or something will emerge that will be, here's the media outlet that we will give you, that everyone should review, that is not going to push you to the margins, but bring us back to a more reasonable compromise center.
That's great feedback and a great perspective. Our next question comes from someone who I know to be an alumnus of Rutgers, as well as an Army National Guardsman. And he says, how have organizational diversity and inclusion efforts throughout your experiences contributed to success in your teams, and asks if you have any specific examples?
Well, we overseas, someone questioned me during one of my presidential interviews, not for Norwich, for a different one, about it was an interesting question about my position with Islam, because I'd been in the Middle East for most of my adult life, in Saudi Arabia, of course, and Kuwait and other places where I was really immersed in Islam for my entire adult life. And Turkey, of course, being a secular Muslim country, but it was becoming more and more prevalent. So I learned to appreciate, and this is what diversity is supposed to be, right? Different people coming together, attacking a problem with different viewpoints. And that makes us, from there, we develop and we achieve a more elegant answer that is inclusive in its solution to the greatest effect. But we've even politicized diversity lately, right? I mean, that's another thing that's been pushed to these sides. You either, diversity is a trigger for all kinds of stuff. For one side, the other side, diversity is everything, but it's very limited in its application. So I would just say, I've seen diversity work, and it's the only way to be effective in this society, in this global community now. And Norwich University, we just hired, believe it or not, last year, our first ever vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was met with great celebration by some and with great hostility by others because of the, I'm going to say trigger, I don't mean to say trigger, but just the emotion it elicits just to use those phrases now. They think it's a full corruption of the traditions, but it's not. It's a campus culture thing, right? Because we're internationalizing our campus. We have the president of the nation of Panama is a Norwich University graduate. The entire officer corps of the Indonesian military are Norwich graduates. Most of the officers of Thailand, et cetera. We have an incredible international presence. We're going to bring more international students to our campus. that's going to be an additive experience for all of our students. So, it's funny, we always say diversity initiatives, we just called it doing business. So it's just what you did before it had a label, and it was effective then. It's always been effective, working alongside allies, right? So I've done it in the military, highly effective. In higher ed, it is omnipresent and it has overtaken most things. But if diversity and diversity goals and DEI initiatives are everything, then they're nothing. They have to be measurable effects, and we have to explain why we're doing the things and then demonstrate why that was just so effective. But we've been very lazy with it. We've just said diversity, we've achieved diversity goals, and we high five and we move on. We never achieved inclusion, and we never demonstrated why it was important and why it had this measurable effect, where everyone can then say, oh, yeah, we should do that. Okay. And it's forming teams. And so who's the chief diversity officer of Norwich University? It's the president. It has to be the executive if we're going to treat it seriously. Did I end that too abruptly?
No.
Margaret's strolling furiously, everyone. You can't see her.
I'm sorry, multitasking, like most of you are probably doing at your computers as well.
You're doing great.
I'm going to close today's session with this last question, which I think is very, very relevant to your multifaceted role of having served in the military and holding a sort of civilian role now. Can you describe how you were able to transition from the military, where people, quote, follow orders and things are more top down, versus the civilian work where it is more of a request, or you have to work more toward collaboration and agreement in a more collegial environment?
So it's a great question, and it really highlights a great misconception, I think, of what the military is like right now. It is much less top-down driven than I think a lot of people would realize. It is, you have here's your mission that must be accomplished. This is the expectation for an outcome. But then there's a tremendous flexibility to get there. And leaders who lead through, so there's the S1 through S4 model of leadership, if you recall that, but S1 is very directive and S4 is fully delegated. In the middle, you'd make your transitions. The S1 model of leadership, which is directive and almost totalitarian, has been shown time and again to be completely ineffective, even in the military. Now, there are times where the order is, we are going to do this, get your gear on, we're going. And people do that. But by and large, in combat, obviously there's different stresses and you can't have the time for debate and collaboration. You need to just get to the mission and you need to execute because lives are at risk. But generally, military decision-making processes are much more collaborative and much more in line with the civilian model than most people would realize. So it's not as directive as you would think unless you're actively engaged in the field. But even in civilian workplaces and civilian businesses, there is a time where the executive has to say, this is it, we're doing this, and do it. But that is a rarity, but it's just as rare in the civilian side as it is in the military. So it hasn't been a difficult transition. I've always had a empathetic and collaborative leadership style, and it's generated good effects for me over time, because that's my style. Everyone has their own leadership style. No one should try to adapt somebody else's leadership style to themselves, because then it's inauthentic, and that means it's ineffective, especially this generation. They can smell out inauthenticity in a hot second. It's stunning how well they do that. But my leadership style has always been more empathetic, more collaborative. So it's translated for me pretty easily.
Well, I would like to thank you so much on behalf of Dean Lay's Lifelong Learning team and all of my colleagues here at Rutgers Business School for being here on Veterans Day, for reflecting on your, both of you, for reflecting on your lives and careers of leadership and service, Colonel Mark Anarumo and Lieutenant Colonel John Chaco. Thank you for your time and for an extremely informative and relevant conversation today. I'd like to give a big shout out to my colleagues who stepped in so that we could bring this live in a studio environment to you. So thank you, gentlemen who are behind the cameras and the computers and the lighting and all that that we've brought in today. Thanks to our audience for some great questions and comments about today's session. Just want to remind everyone that our series takes place on the second Thursdays of each month. We welcome your feedback and hope that you'll stay on for just a moment longer to complete a very brief survey about your experience today. And for our students, hang on just a moment longer than that, and we will share the QR codes that you're all asking me about in chat. We'll be with that in just a moment. But to our veterans who are here today, as well as who are out there, whether they're on our home front or serving anywhere else in the world, thank you.